Ma Dio è Dio per tutti.
But God is God for all.
È più importante del tuo.
But my God is more important than your God.
Pope Francis has just made a statement about Jesus and the entire Christian faith that has ignited global controversy.
Tutti figli di Dio.
And if God is God for all, then we're all sons and daughters of God.
His Holiness's recent goodwill tour in Asia was filled with positive remarks until he reached Singapore. In an attempt to preach about unity, the Pope made a declaration that many are now calling blasphemous. What exactly did the Pope say? Join us in this special episode as we unveil the shocking revelation Pope Francis just revealed about Jesus. Modern-day Christianity. The atmosphere was tense at the interreligious meeting with young people at Catholic Junior College in Singapore. Pope Francis stood before the crowd, his words calm yet unsettling. He spoke of different paths to reach God, mentioning Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, and Christian beliefs as if they were all the same.
Qualcuno Sikh, qualcuno musulmano, qualcuno
Muslim,
Hindi, qualcuno cristiano,
Hindu,
ma sono
Christian.
diversi cammini.
They're different paths.
For many Catholics, this was not just another speech, it was something far more dangerous. It symbolized the spread of a poisonous ideology that had slowly seeped into the Catholic Church over the past few decades. This belief that all roads lead to God had found its way into pulpits, classrooms, and seminaries, corrupting the core of the Church. Whether born into the faith or converted later in life, many Catholics encountered this deceptive idea at some point. It was like a silent toxin, creeping in, making believers think that any path could lead to salvation. But for those paying close attention, it was clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate shift, slowly guiding people away from the truth. Pope Francis' words echo unsettlingly, but they weren't new.
Ma il mio Dio è più importante del tuo.
But my God is more important than your God.
Dividing the Church. In the Pope's encyclical Fratelli Tutti, he hinted at the same idea in 2020. He claimed that while Christians found their dignity and fraternity in the gospel, others drink from other sources. For many, this comment was more than scandalous. It was outright deceptive. How could the successor of St. Peter, who had once been willing to die for Christ, now speak in such a way? The words seemed to cast a shadow over everything. To some, Fratelli Tutti had been the Pope's darkest moment. But now, with his recent comments in Singapore, it seemed like an even more direct challenge to the very heart of the Catholic faith.
And if God is God for all, then we're all sons and daughters of God.
Ma il mio Dio è più importante del tuo.
But my God is more important than your God.
Was the Pope questioning the divinity of Christ and his dominion over the world? The signs were growing harder to ignore. A 2021 study by Pew Research showed an alarming trend. Catholics were more likely than other Christians to believe that people who didn't believe in God could still go to heaven. Only 16% of Catholics thought their faith was the one true path, compared to much higher numbers among Protestants and evangelicals. Somewhere along the way, many Catholics had been led to believe that Jesus wasn't essential, that he was just one option among many. This wasn't a simple mistake. It was the result of years of misleading teachings. Pope Francis confirmed that it was intentional.
Cammino, lingue per arrivare a Dio.
There's only one God, and each of us is a language, so to speak, in order to arrive at God.
Qualcuno Sikh, qualcuno musulmano, qualcuno
Sikh, Muslim,
Hindi, qualcuno cristiano,
Hindu,
ma sono
Christian.
diversi cammini.
They're different paths.
Understood?
In 2019, he signed a document with Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, claiming that God willed the diversity of religions. Later that year, he told a general audience that other religions always look toward heaven and God, urging fraternity among them.
Quello che Dio vuole è la fratellanza fra noi.
Then, in 2022, at an interreligious congress in Kazakhstan, a declaration was made. Religious pluralism was an expression of God's will. Yet, this belief had no place in Catholic teaching. The prophets and patriarchs had fought against it. Before his death, Joshua had challenged the Israelites to choose whom they would serve, the Lord or pagan gods. Elijah had faced off against the false prophets of Baal, and Mattathias had resisted the wicked king Antiochus, who tried to lead the Jews astray. Jesus himself condemned such thinking.
My house shall be a house of prayer, and you have turned it into a den of thieves.
In John chapter 14, he said, "No man cometh to the Father but by me." He declared that belief in him was the true work of God and commanded his apostles to spread the gospel to all nations. Those who believed would be saved, but those who did not would be condemned. The Church Fathers, too, rejected the idea of multiple paths. Saint Irenaeus, in his work against the heresies, warned that rejecting Christ was to reject salvation itself. 2 centuries later, Saint Augustine reminded believers that while God was the destination, there was only one road to reach him, and that road was Christ. These truths had guided the Catholic Church for centuries. But now, Pope Francis seemed to be leading the faithful down a dangerous road that directly opposed Christ's teachings. Once solid in its beliefs, the Church finds itself at a crossroads thanks to a secret sect. The Secret Order. The false idea of universal brotherhood, dressed up in new clothes, is really just another version of an old lie. For 2,000 years, the Church has been forced to face these heresies, popping up like mushrooms after the rain. Saint Irenaeus, one of the early defenders of the faith, fought against the Gnostic sects that twisted the truth. No matter how different each heresy seemed, they all shared one dangerous thing. They tried to take away the power of Christ, denying that he was both human and divine. One of the earliest heresies, Docetism, claimed that Jesus was divine, but only pretended to be human. On the other hand, the Ebionites believed Jesus was a mere man, refusing to accept his divinity. Later, in the 4th century, Nestorianism came along, denying that Jesus was truly both God and man in one person. Pelagianism was more subtle, but just as deadly. It claimed that humans didn't need God's grace to be saved, dismissing the importance of Jesus' sacrifice. And the Albigensians? They didn't believe Jesus was really human, so Mary wasn't the mother of God, and the crucifixion was all a trick. In the same way, the belief that all religions are equal mocks the true nature of Christ. It claims that anyone, by following any religion, can find a way to heaven without Jesus. It turns Christ into a stop along the way, an excellent option if you're tired, but not a crucial part of the journey. This idea is far worse than all the heresies before it, because it directly denies Christ's power as creator, judge, and redeemer. The truth is clear. We were made through Jesus, God's word, and only by following him can we be saved. As Saint Athanasius said, God saved the world through the same word who created it initially. Saint Peter said even more bluntly, "There is no other name under heaven by which we can be saved." While we are all children of God by creation, there is a special bond between God and those who believe in him. The Catechism of the Council of Trent teaches that the Church embraces all of humanity. But Saint Irenaeus warned that only those who obey God's will are truly his children. As Irenaeus put it, those who don't believe or refuse to follow his will are sons of the devil. The Vatican's current revolt against the kingship of Christ is at the root of the confusion and abuse that Catholics endure today, as predicted by Archbishop Fulton Sheen. The idea that all religions are valid paths to God is a lie. They aren't just different ways of saying the same thing, and they aren't like different roads up a mountain. There is only one way, and it was written in blood on the cross. Above Jesus' head, nailed for all the world to see, were the words, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," forever mocking those who thought they could escape the truth. Why must we comment on the Pope's statement? What effect does it have, ultimately? The leader of the Church? After the Pope's controversial statement, Gavin Ashenden from Catholic Unscripted decided to speak up. He couldn't stay silent any longer, believing others in the church needed to join him. The Pope, after all, is supposed to represent Jesus and everything the Catholic Church has stood for, teachings people have lived and died for. Gavin believed that the Pope's message wasn't just disappointing, it was lazy, reflecting an attitude born from the Woodstock generation of the 60s and 70s. This mindset didn't like hard decisions, preferring to pretend everything was fine and that choices didn't really matter. It was a dangerous way of thinking, one that ignored the truth. As the host laid out his thoughts, he began with spiritual geography, a term used by religious teachers to map out different belief systems and where they lead. He started with atheism, the belief that there is no ultimate principle, no God. How could one say there's no meaning in the universe while using language to express that very lack of meaning? Atheism isn't a real intellectual argument. It was more emotional, a refusal to be told what to do, especially concerning morality. Then Gavin turned his focus to pantheism. Pantheism believed in a life force, denying personality or individual significance and claiming that everything was part of a larger whole. Buddhism, a form of pantheism, suggested that our personalities were illusions and that we should strive to detach from life, to become like a drop of water dissolving into the sea. This belief lacked a clear distinction between good and evil. He moved on to polytheism, a belief that there were many gods or life forces, each offering different answers to life's problems. Hinduism, for example, saw the world as filled with different divine forces, none truly standing out as ultimate. This belief also didn't address the deeper issues of good and evil. Finally, Gavin turned to monotheism, beliefs like Christianity and Islam, which claimed one ultimate principle, one God. However, even here, the paths differed. In Islam, the rule was to submit to God. Christianity, on the other hand, offered something different. Jesus gave people the dignity of choice, the ability to choose between good and evil, and through his death, even when wrong decisions were made, people could repent and find their way back to God. At every turn, Gavin showed how different beliefs led to different places. But what troubled him most was the Pope's attitude. The Pope acted as if these differences didn't matter, as if all beliefs were equally valid, and that fighting over them was pointless. This is a kind of spiritual laziness, a refusal to confront the truth. What right did the Pope, or any monotheist, have to tell atheists, polytheists, or pantheists they were mistaken? What right did they have to say that their pursuit of truth was just a delusion? The answer is clear: no right at all. Yet the Pope's message felt like more than just words. It was an attempt to take something precious away from people: the dignity of choice. The anchor thought about those who had fought hard in life, faced the struggle between good and evil, and made heroic decisions. It wasn't easy to walk the narrow path Jesus spoke of. It required overcoming selfishness, cowardice, and compromise. The narrow way led to heaven, to the presence of God, the moral and holy Creator. The other path, the easy one, led people away from him. It was terrifying to think that even someone as powerful as the Pope could stray so far from the teachings of Jesus. The truth was that Pope Francis wasn't acting as a true Catholic leader. His teachings weren't aligned with Jesus or the saints of the Church. Surprisingly, this is not the only time that the Pope has made a controversial statement that goes against everything that the Church represents. Technically, weaving through loopholes. On January 25, 2013, Pope Francis emphatically said that being homosexual is not a crime. He criticized laws that criminalize homosexuality and urged church leaders, especially bishops, to show tenderness as God does with all his children. He added that we are all children of God and that God loves us as we are. However, he acknowledged that some might argue against his statement, saying that whoever says that it is a sin should also remember that it is a sin to lack charity with one another. Still in shock by the Pope's statement, Father Martin, who edits Outreach Faith, a resource for LGBTQ Catholics, reached out to the Pope for clarification. In a bold reaffirmation, Pope Francis declared that being homosexual is not a crime, but because of the severe backlash from earlier, the Pope decided to take advantage of loops in his statement. He added that any sexual act outside of marriage is considered a sin, and that in Christianity, homosexuality is a sin, but not a crime against society. Traditionally, the Catholic Church has had strict teachings on marriage and sexuality, often holding a conservative stance on these issues. However, the Pope has addressed the matter more openly and inclusively. For the first time in Church history, Pope Francis publicly discussed the possibility of blessing same-gender couples. While the Church's official teaching on marriage remains unchanged, Pope Francis's statements suggest a more compassionate approach towards homosexual couples. Just as Gavin Ashenden from Catholic Unscripted has suggested, the Pope has either avoided direct confrontation or is pushing an agenda. It isn't sure when the Pope went astray, but it seemed like he had shifted from the truth of the Gospels to something more like a neo-Buddhist philosophy. Is evil masquerading as good? Who is the 266th Pope of the Catholic Church? From Buenos Aires to the Vatican. Before becoming Pope Francis, he was known as Jorge Mario Bergoglio. He was born on December 17, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. His father, Mario Bergoglio, was an Italian immigrant and a hard-working railway worker. His mother, Regina Maria Sivori, was a devoted homemaker who focused on raising her children. From a young age, Jorge showed a strong interest in religion, influenced by his family's deep Catholic faith. This foundation would later lead him to develop views that some Catholics found surprising. He attended a local Catholic school run by the Salesians, where he began to explore his faith more deeply. At the age of 21, Jorge faced a serious health challenge when he contracted pneumonia, which required surgery to remove part of his lung. This illness became a pivotal moment, drawing him closer to God and reinforcing his desire to serve others. After recovering, Jorge focused on becoming a priest, a dream he had nurtured for years. His journey began with a visit to a church, where a kind priest inspired him during confession. This encounter motivated Jorge to dedicate his life to the church. He studied at the Archdiocesan Seminary in Buenos Aires, where he immersed himself in theology and pastoral care for 3 years. After completing his studies, he joined the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, embracing a life committed to education and social justice. He entered the Jesuit novitiate, learning about Jesuit spirituality and engaging in community service. After completing his training, Jorge was ordained as a priest. As a Jesuit, he devoted himself to education, pastoral care, and social justice. He taught literature and philosophy at a Jesuit high school in Buenos Aires. During this time, Argentina faced political turmoil, including a military dictatorship. Despite these challenges, Jorge remained committed to his faith and worked hard to support marginalized people. As he gained experience, Jorge took on leadership roles within the Jesuit community. He became the provincial superior of the Jesuits in Argentina, where he showed strong leadership and helped guide their work. In 1992, he became the auxiliary bishop of Buenos Aires, working closely with local communities. Then, in 1998, he was named the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, influencing the Catholic Church in Argentina. In 2001, Jorge received a major promotion when Pope John Paul II made him a cardinal. His reputation for humility and compassion grew as a cardinal, earning him respect in the global Catholic community. The pivotal moment in Jorge's journey came in 2013, when he was elected as the 266th Pope of the Catholic Church, marking the beginning of his papacy as Pope Francis. The Pope's reign began with many controversies, starting with that of St. Peter. A decade ago, the Vatican revealed a mysterious box for the first time. Inside, they believe lie the ancient bones of St. Peter, the apostle and first bishop of Rome. Pope Francis decided to make his first decree as pope, a bold and important decision. This moment was significant because no pope before 2013 had ever confirmed that the 8 bone fragments hidden beneath St. Peter's Basilica truly belonged to St. Peter himself. The bones were discovered deep in the dark grottos beneath the basilica in 1939, a maze of history stretching back 2,000 years. Yet, even today, no one can say for sure if these bones really belonged to the apostle. In 1968, Pope Paul VI acknowledged that the connection seemed convincing, but could not provide solid proof to support the claim. After the Vatican embraced these remains as those of the apostle on the Pope's decree, many questions have continued to linger. What if the bones in that old chest don't belong to Peter at all? Author Bruno Bartolini, who wrote The Ears of the Vatican, pointed out that no pope has ever allowed scientists to study the bones, perhaps out of fear of what they might find. Adding to the intrigue, hidden documents in the Vatican tell of a 1,000-year-old curse on St. Peter's tomb. According to legend, anyone who dares to open it will face terrible misfortune for 1,000 years. Well, none of the unanswered questions bothered the Pope. Seeing his disregard for tradition, many have started to wonder how the Pope rose to the apex of the Church. One of the notable aspects of Pope Francis's election is his background as a Jesuit. He made history as the first Jesuit pope, breaking with a long tradition of papal appointments from different backgrounds. The Jesuits are known for their emphasis on education, social justice, and a commitment to serving others. This background influenced his approach to leading the Church, addressing various global issues, and being open about controversial topics that many before him didn't talk about in public. In short, he is a modern-day pope. Pope Francis quickly became known for his efforts to connect with people from different cultures and backgrounds. Throughout his papacy, Pope Francis focused on several key issues. His teachings often addressed issues such as inequality, environmental sustainability, and the need for compassion and understanding. Pope Francis also made efforts to reform the Church and address issues within its own structure. He called for greater transparency and accountability, aiming to make the Church more responsive to the needs of its members and the world at large. One of the ways that he hopes to achieve his agenda is by building bridges between different faiths and cultures, promoting peace and cooperation. Has the standard in the Church changed? Another area where Pope Francis has stirred debate is his views on hell. Traditionally, the Catholic Church teaches that hell is a place of eternal punishment for the damned. However, Pope Francis has expressed a different perspective. He has suggested that the concept of hell might not be literal, and that the souls of the damned could simply cease to exist after committing severe sins. This view represents a significant departure from traditional Catholic teaching. Pope Francis has argued that focusing on the fear of hell might not be the most effective way to inspire moral behavior and faith. Instead, he has emphasized the need for compassion and understanding, focusing on the idea that God's love and mercy are central to faith. Pope Francis's views on abortion also reflect a nuanced approach. While he stringently maintains that abortion is a sin, he has also emphasized the importance of forgiveness. In 2016, he made a notable statement allowing priests to forgive women who have had abortions. This decision was seen as a move towards greater compassion and understanding, acknowledging many women's complex circumstances. Then, in 2018, the Pope took a strong position against the death penalty. He declared that, regardless of the circumstances, the death sentence is always wrong. This stance aligns with his belief in the possibility of redemption and his focus on protecting human life. It is seen as a positive position that has contributed to ongoing discussions about criminal justice and human rights within the Church and beyond. But none of these claims come even close to being as controversial as this shocking revelation he made about the end of time. In a recent meeting of Catholic bishops, Pope Francis shocked everyone by revealing that the Antichrist is among us, though many remain unaware. Experts believe that as the head of the Catholic Church, the Pope follows traditional Christian teachings and draws wisdom from the Bible and divine revelations. As seen in the Bible, the Antichrist is tied to the frightening prophecies, especially in the books of Daniel, John, and Revelation, where antichrists are described as individuals or groups opposing Christ's teachings. In 1 John chapter 2 verses 18 to 22 and 2 John chapter 17 verse 7, we see hints about this mysterious figure. There is a theory that the Antichrist could be a deceptive spiritual figure. This theory arises from passages like 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verses 3 to 4, where the Apostle Paul speaks of a man of lawlessness who exalts himself above all. Some view this as a warning about a religious leader who misleads followers. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus warns of false prophets who perform wonders to deceive even the faithful. This could be a forewarning of charming leaders who lead people astray, hinting at the presence of an antichrist with religious allure. There is also the political leader theory, which adds another layer of intrigue. Some believe the Antichrist could be a political figure masquerading as a unifier of different faiths while secretly undermining them. This aligns with biblical warnings about deceitful leaders throughout history. Even after biblical times, people have identified various figures as potential antichrists linked to political power. For instance, during the medieval period, Pope Innocent III was seen by some as an antichrist due to his significant influence. Similarly, historical figures like Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler have been suggested as modern-day comparisons, given their devastating impacts on society. The Book of Daniel also addresses the Antichrist, suggesting a powerful leader who causes chaos. Although it doesn't explicitly mention the Antichrist, Daniel's vision of a mighty goat symbolizes a leader who becomes great through cunning and destruction. Another theory suggests that the Antichrist might seek to rebuild the Roman Empire. This idea arises from examining history and politics rather than direct biblical quotes. Scholars propose that the Antichrist could unify the world under a powerful authority, reminiscent of historical leaders who sought to dominate. Could it be that we are seeing the works of the Antichrist in these recent decrees? Well, one cannot be certain, but given the origins of the Vatican, it will be no surprise that there is a sect lurking in the shadows doing what is far from God's work. For better understanding, how did the Vatican come to be? The rise of Christianity.
Under his leadership, the Roman Empire reaches its greatest territorial extent, 2 million square miles.
Well, if you know the history of the Roman Catholic Church, you know Constantine, this is like mainstream history. Constantine, he was a pagan, which can be considered Luciferian.
The creation of Vatican City came about because of a decision made by the Roman Emperor Constantine. However, it wasn't his deep faith that inspired this. It was his strong desire for power, much like the Antichrist, who seeks to gain control by bringing people together across borders. In the early 4th century, Constantine's rise to power changed history forever. By 306 AD, he was named emperor, and by 324 AD, he ruled the entire Roman Empire. But it was what happened next that truly shaped the future of Christianity. In 325 AD, Constantine called for the First Council of Nicaea. This was a major event where important changes to Christian beliefs were officially accepted. The council discussed topics like the nature of God and how Easter should be celebrated. However, this was just a new chapter in a long, dark story of change. Before Constantine, Christianity had faced over 200 years of harsh persecution. The Roman Empire, under rulers like Emperor Nero, viewed Christians as enemies. They tortured and punished those who refused to give up their faith. By the end of the 3rd century, this persecution had spread throughout the empire. Christians who refused to worship Roman gods or the emperor faced terrible consequences. In the mid-3rd century, Emperor Decius enforced a cruel law. Followers of Christ were forced to bow before Roman idols or face execution. Decius believed this would restore Rome's past glory by uniting everyone under their old pagan religion. It was a time filled with fear and bloodshed, but within a few decades, everything changed. How did Roman society shift from despising Christianity to accepting it under Constantine? The change began gradually. Over time, Christian leaders started to accept or even adopt practices that were not originally part of their faith. By the 2nd century, thinkers like Clement of Alexandria began mixing Christian beliefs with Greek philosophy. They encouraged Christians to be open to new ideas, even those rooted in pagan traditions. In Rome, Bishop Victor I sparked a big debate in the 2nd century by suggesting a new way to celebrate the resurrection. He insisted it should be observed on Sunday instead of the traditional Passover celebration. Slowly, practices like this began to take hold, and by the time Constantine rose to power, Christianity had absorbed many customs from paganism. The faith was changing, and Constantine played a crucial role in this evolution. Raised as a pagan who worshipped the unconquered sun, Constantine didn't completely let go of his old beliefs. Instead, he blended them with Christianity. Before the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, he ordered his soldiers to paint a Christian symbol on their shields. However, this symbol wasn't purely Christian, it had roots in ancient Egyptian symbols. By then, Christianity had been greatly influenced by pagan traditions, including the use of symbols, festivals, and even the idea of a divine trinity. In 321 AD, Constantine declared Sunday, the venerable day of the sun, to be a day of rest. This was a nod to his pagan background, but soon became a part of Christian practice. Later, in 363 AD, the Council of Laodicea officially established Sunday worship instead of the traditional Sabbath. Constantine achieved what Decius could not. While Decius tried to unify the empire under paganism, Constantine succeeded by creating a new, transformed version of Christianity that embraced many pagan practices. This transformation was so deep that even today, traces of those pagan traditions can still be found in many Christian practices. Is the Pope doing God's work or building the Roman Empire? Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.